Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really powerful critique of a major intellectual movement. One that questioned everything, but maybe, just maybe, it forgot to check who was actually in the room when it did.
So let's just start with this question because it really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. What happens when a theory that's supposed to be all about celebrating difference ends up creating its own kind of exclusion? All right, first things first, let's get our terms straight. Postmodernism. This was a pretty revolutionary movement in thought. Its whole goal was to take on what it called master narratives. Those big one-size-fits-all stories about progress, truth, and history. Instead, it was all about emphasizing difference and questioning any idea that claimed to be the final, stable truth. But for all its promise, a really crucial voice stepped up and pointed out a fundamental problem with this new way of thinking. Turns out, not everyone felt included in this big celebration of difference. And this is where the incredible feminist scholar and activist Bell Hooks enters the picture. And yeah, you'll see her name is always in lowercase. That was totally intentional. She wanted the focus to be on her ideas, on the substance of her work, not on her as a personality. This quote, it just cuts right to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? Hooks argued that for all its talk about difference, postmodernism was seriously failing in practice. It wasn't engaging with the work of Black writers and thinkers, and so it became, in her own powerful words, a discourse dominated by white male voices. And this just lays out that central contradiction so clearly. On one hand, the promise was amazing. Celebrate difference, deconstruct power, challenge those old stories. But the reality, as Hooks showed, was that it was ignoring Black voices and creating these new kind of subtle forms of exclusion within academia.
So you might be thinking, okay, but why was this so important? What were the real-world stakes here? This sounds like a pretty academic debate, right?
Well, here's why it mattered so much. The timing was everything. Postmodernism started critiquing the very idea of a stable identity at the exact same time that Black people were in the middle of forming what Hooks called a radical Black subjectivity, a brand new, powerful, and collective sense of self.
And Hooks was really clear that this wasn't just some abstract philosophical argument. No, this was deeply tied to a lived reality, to the ongoing social conditions where the collective African-American experience was still one of, and I'm quoting here, continued displacement, profound alienation, and despair. You can imagine, that feeling of hopelessness created this deep yearning, a real hunger for a critical voice, for a framework that could actually help make sense of that experience, especially when all the old master narratives were being torn to shreds.
But here's what's so brilliant about what Hooks did. She didn't just want to tear postmodernism down. Her goal was to rebuild it, to radically reimagine it into something that could be genuinely useful for marginalized communities. She basically said, look, the core tools of this movement, like its critique of essentialism, the idea that a group of people has some fixed, unchanging essence, that stuff could be incredibly powerful if we just applied it correctly. It could be used to promote the idea of multiple Black identities, to fight back against that single monolithic view that often comes from colonial thinking. And it could help us finally see the deep connections between race and class. For any of this to work, though, one concept was absolutely key: the authority of experience. Hooks argued that these academic theories had to be grounded in the lived reality of oppressed people. Your personal experience wasn't just a story. It was a valid, crucial source of knowledge. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. How does this fit into a bigger picture? Well, Hooks' work isn't in a vacuum. It's actually a vital part of the foundation for modern feminism. See, a lot like how Hooks pushed postmodernism to be better, modern feminism isn't just about a single issue. It's about questioning those fixed ideas of gender, taking a hard look at the category of woman itself, and, this is so important, exploring all the intersections of gender with class and race. It's about analyzing how power works and how our very sense of self is put together.
So what's the big takeaway here? The legacy of Bell Hooks' critique is really this powerful framework for connecting the dots. It teaches us that race, class, and gender aren't these separate, isolated issues. They are deeply interconnected systems of power, and you have to understand them together. And that leaves us with one last, really provocative thought, one that brings her critique right into our world today. As we navigate all of our big conversations about technology, politics, culture, we have to ask ourselves, whose voices are we still not hearing?